Alright, guys, welcome back to the pod. So, I'm not trying to make a super negative episode. This is not my intention. I just want to say it straight up. I'm not trying to make some episode that sounds like man hating or that sounds like I'm talking about, you know, things like oh, men aren't good or too insecure or whatever. But that's not really my intention. I mean, everybody has potential to be toxic and insecure and pushing those toxic insecurities on other people. I'm not even gonna try to open the idea of if men do it more or less. I don't know. I work in the field of psych. I can tell you, in a field where I've worked more with women staff that are of my same level, as well as other female staff who are directors, supervisors, leads, people in higher positions who are females. I've definitely experienced working underneath females that are completely toxic with the way they are too. Just mean, lying, gaslighting, verbally, emotionally abusive. Let's call it what it is. I don't know. And then I've known people who are men who react that way too. So I kind of had a question the other day where I was like, is it worth it? I'm kind of debating, is it worth it to spend my time and energy with people or for people who just don't have it together with trying to practice non-toxic social behaviors, people who don't try to reflect, people who don't have an awareness or care. It's hard to really tell if it's a lack of awareness or a lack of care that people have when they're doing these certain types of behaviors. Behaviors, I would say, nagging people, just the negative, like, always, trying to, like, I wouldn't call it shaming always necessarily, but trying to, like, act superior and saying things like, oh, like, you did this or you did, like, blaming, I guess, blaming others for stuff, bringing up hot button topics that they know people are going to try to debate them on, like religion, politics, all kinds of stuff. Trying to tell people what to do, like trying to control them and say, like, you need to do this because I think it's important, kind of thing. And I'll explain it more in detail when I'm talking about, but I also, during this week, because this is all kind of coming up this week, during this week, I also was kind of coming across content. I want to say this was Wednesday I was coming across this content, or maybe Tuesday. I watched a couple videos of the Joe Rogan Experience, like old videos, but I watched them nonetheless because I wanted one that was about martial arts. I didn't want, like, there were some episodes that Joe Rogan had on his podcast on Spotify that were, more some of the newer ones were like um interviews with comics, and I was kind of like, I don't really want to watch any comedian interviews. I want to watch some interviews with people who are what do you call it? Um uh Martial artists. And so I scrolled till I found one. Um, which one is it? I'm trying to find which one it was. There's an interview. It's not very new. With it's number 143 with Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland. Um, that dude. I don't even know what to say. I was like floored by some of the comments he was making, but I was also like, okay, that's kind of just how he's gonna talk. He had some outrageous things to say. I didn't really keep listening to the whole thing. I wasn't like so uber offended by it, but spoiler, I guess. Like, I heard him talking about, his life, his parent, his relationship with his parents as a youth, as a kid, where he used to sleep in the same bed as his mom. He said up until a pretty unnatural age, he mentioned, because he thought that his dad was gonna kill his mom on multiple occasions, and even on one occasion when they got the dad arrested, the mom went and bailed him out, and different things like that, where he talked about history of like abuse in his household. And there was this other person talking about history of abuse. Sorry, I'm gonna make a little bit of noise here. I'm gonna have half of one of these neurogum pieces. Yeah, there was another person talking about abuse. Trying to get my energy up today, guys, so I can get my creative stuff done. Who was I thinking about? I was thinking about somebody who was. Oh, that's right. When I listened to like the Chris Garza podcast, um, and how Chris Garza talked about, um, he interviews a lot of metal musicians and bands, and so someone on that podcast was talking about the history. Like, there have been multiple episodes where people have talked about history of abuse in their families on that podcast, and it kind of got me wondering, is that something that people who gravitate towards metal music kind of like is that like is there some kind of correlation there? I mean, I love metal, so I'm not really, I don't really care why people like certain music. Like, that's not really like an issue, but I was kind of wondering about that. It kind of crossed my mind. And another thing I was watching was a couple Super Time episodes, and one or both, I can't remember now, but Jade Fox and Arrows have this series that they pop up on, that they've created, called Super Time, and they each create an episode on their channel that is them speaking about their experiences with um, um, their experiences with family members and with father figures. Like they were kind of mentioning, I think Jade mentioned that Jade has a lot of friends that don't have good father figures. And then, Arrow started talking about their experience. And I was just kind of like, this concept kept coming up over and over and over about like, I wasn't really taking it to be like men or fathers necessarily, but it just kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And yesterday, I wasn't feeling like super well. And so I didn't really get up early to do the stuff that I was going to do. And so, like, I was up, of course, but I was, on some other set of timestamps from what I had originally thought I was going to get up and plan to do. I was like, I don't feel up to doing most of the stuff on this list, and my sinuses were feeling weird, and I was like, maybe I'm getting a cold. I don't really know. Maybe today's the day to just take it easy. So, me and this friend were talking about, like I think I mentioned earlier about The Revenant, the scene where it's like the bear scene, because we were talking about martial arts first, and then we were talking about, like he kept sending me these videos about like bears, like kind of wrestling with each other. And then I was like, did you ever see The Revenant? And remember that scene with the bear? And then like we started talking about that movie, and so that movie was on my mind like Wednesday night. And then I didn't remember the whole movie. I don't remember it, but then I streamed it online, because I was like, once I determined on Thursday that I wasn't really gonna be doing too much productive stuff and I was just gonna relax, I was like, let me make it a Leonardo DiCaprio movie day. So I started with The Revenant, rewatched it. I don't know exactly what order I rewatched movies in, but I think I watched This Boy's Life. That's the movie where it's Robert De Niro and Leo when he's young. It's a movie where he's got a mother who's kind of like picks up and moves here and there, because of an unstable father situation that they left from. And then she ends up with some dude that's kind of just trash, basically completely narcissistic, lying. Like he just tries to gaslight everybody, lying, and he becomes more and more abusive. Like he's just always just like attacking people verbally and just physically, and like he's a jerk. But I definitely call that abusive. But I watched that. I watched Marvin's Room, which you don't see any father figure directly in that, but I've seen that movie before, but I didn't realize that it had so many psychological themes in it. Kind of about like, I don't know exactly if I can peg exactly what was going on, but Leo's character ends up in like an inpatient psychiatric facility. And so there were movies like that. There was I think I watched October Sky as well, another one where it's like there's this dad that kind of has this like problem against his son, who's the main character. It's back when Jake Gyllenhaal was like younger, and yeah, I don't want to spoil all these movies, but to me they're really good movies. I kind of like movies like that, and I do tend to rewatch certain movies every few years, and so all of those I've seen before, but I was like, let me rewatch these because I'm just having a movie day. So I just rewatched all those movies. It was a whole lot. Like, I know it was like 4 movies I watched yesterday, but I started early and just spent time watching them. Um, and I wasn't like purposely picking movies or consciously purposely picking movies that had this theme coming up with, like, you know, like a parent, and then, maybe there's just all these complex family dynamics. I really like that combination of De Niro, DiCaprio, and Meryl Streep with Marvin's Room. I was like, dang, man. Strong cast. But, um, yeah, it's just interesting. Like, I was telling one of my friends, I was like, I wasn't purposely gravitating towards these types of themes, but even when I was just organically watching content the days before, it kept coming up. And I was just like, why do these themes keep coming up? Like, let me just sit and think about it. Like, it wasn't so much why do they keep coming up, but kind of like, my friend wrote me something the other day, that I kind of like if I don't have the energy, I kind of just leave it, because it's like, it's a lot of good deep thought, but I kind of didn't really want to delve into it those days. I was like, let me wait till I have time to actually delve into this topic. But then strangely, like, I kind of glanced over it and saw the topics that were coming up, and then strangely, um earlier that day, and then the messages that he was sending that night, and earlier the next day, and the messages that the themes that were coming up in the stuff I was watching, I was like, why are all these movies about, like, why is there so much content about, like, these dynamics with, like, parents and abusive situations and people? And so, um let's call that a super long intro into this topic. That's kind of where I kind of got to with this topic, where I was like, I need to sit with this, and, like, I kind of like to talk myself through things. I was like, what is going on, And I think this was like maybe after the first Leo, no, the second Leo movie I watched. It was after watching The Revenant. And that movie, there's not like, there they don't show like a very toxic dynamic with parent relationships, but there is a character in there that is just like, what is wrong with this dude? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you guys meet people like that, but every so often I meet people like that where I'm just like, what is wrong with this person? Like, why do they even want to be interacting with people if they just seem so unhappy with everybody and everything, and just like, why don't they just stay to their own miserable self? Like, like, they're getting in everybody's way. Um and you know, there were some extremes taken in that movie, so um I don't want to spoil it though, but yeah, it was a whole, yeah, if you haven't seen the movie, if you like that kind of movie, I usually don't gravitate towards maybe those types of movies all the time, but I'm a big Leonardo DiCaprio fan. I've liked every movie he's been in that I've seen, and I think I've seen just about all of them. I don't remember all of them, but I think I've seen just about all of them. Um, so yeah, so I wanted to talk about insecure power figures. Maybe that's not the right word. I don't know what I'm gonna title this, but like, insecure people who are insecure, who think that they're, you know, like, they're coming from like a more dominant position. Because there's a lot of this. There's a lot of this going around, guys. But let me go into what I saw, what I was writing. Um, so that was all kind of like in this kind of back and forth with this friend of mine, that I was talking about. And so basically, what I said was, after all that kind of like background that I had explained about like why are all these things kind of coming up, like all these themes, like what is the combination, what is the overarching theme in all these things. And I was putting like, I obviously don't hate men. I know a lot of good men. I probably hang out more with men than women at times, and especially like earlier in my life. Most of my friends were guys. The majority of my friends were guys. I had a couple female friends, but I felt like guys were way more relatable because I was kind of active and kind of liked that kind of stuff. But then I did kind of realize, I did have like, you know, things that I like to talk about emotionally. Like I remember being with my brother and my neighbor a lot and being like sitting there talking and trying to be like, "Oh, remember that time?" Like just kind of bringing stuff up, or like, and they were just kind of like, they didn't seem like they were able to really, maybe they weren't not able, but they weren't able to comfortably just like delve into those conversations. They just wanted to like wrestle and like build robots and stuff. And so we did that kind of stuff. We play science games and like mix all kind of I don't know, we would mix all kind of stuff together from like chemicals and stuff from our houses, and like it was not the smartest types of hobbies that we had. We'd do that. We'd take things apart. Anything that had wiring in it, we would just destroy. Sometimes we would just take our stuff apart. We would play karate. My friend was in martial arts, and so we would pretend to spar with him. And yeah, things like that. But when it came to like, I always realized, I was like, well, I like having conversations with people and sitting and talking. And I realized most of my guy friends did not want to do that. So I kind of made some other guy friends that were kind of more sensitive guys who liked to sit and talk about stuff, who weren't like super into sports and athletics, and actually would sit and like have conversations. But I didn't usually gravitate towards a lot of females. And the females I did know, I knew them because we played sports together and stuff like that. And so yeah, I was saying that, I don't hate men, but there are times when I hang out with, or have hung out with, men more than women. And most of the men that I'm used to interacting with are great guys. I'm not a man hater. And it's interesting when stuff comes up that's like all those things I was saying about, like, these father figures, or these, family dynamics where there's like, these abusive relationships, either between parent and child, or one parent that feels more dominant than the other and is trying to like be abusive. And I was noticing that some people, and like I mentioned, not always men, it's not always men, because when I've been in very highly concentrated female workspaces, work environments, I've noticed that these dynamics, you'll see them in corporations that are mostly women too. And it's not just corporations, it's like corporations, households, anything that kind of has like some form of a hierarchy where there's like somebody or multiple people who are considered the ones in charge of the people who are under them, who are not considered to be the ones in charge, who are either learning or being taught or being trained or being brought up. Let's give this a second. Oh my gosh. Sorry, guys. All right. Hope where the sirens are going. Hope the people will be okay. This is the second set of sirens within the same day. The other day, I think within 2 hours, we probably heard like 5 or 6 sets of sirens. And this is the second one in an hour. So I'm wondering if it's going to be another one of those days where there's just so much going on. And the other day, unfortunately, there was a shooting on the freeway not far from me. I mean, we're not close to the freeway, but the closest freeway ramp to us was shut. Well, one of the closest freeway ramps to us was shut down because of a shooting on the freeway. So it's getting wild out there, guys. I don't know. Hang in there. Anyways, where was I? Yeah, I've worked with not a lot, but I've worked with a handful of toxic people that, yeah, they were in powerful positions. They were either leads or supervisors or, clinical supervisor, or directors, or people who had, founded a facility. Um, toxic people in various ways. So this is kind of, I wrote this other part where I said, but when some types of people are around others who are in a seemingly vulnerable position to them, they seem to exploit that. Like, they seem to try to exploit that vulnerable position. They get super insecure. Like, if someone who thinks they're big or buff or tough or tall or smart, any of those things that seem like they're like superior seeming traits, they tend to act out because they get insecure just automatically. And so they say or do dumb crap, basically. Completely unprovoked, by the way, and it's definitely an issue. So basically, I don't know if that is very well written. When I do my like text rants with my friends who like to text rant with me, I kind of write differently than as if I were writing like a journal writing. It's more of like writing about this concept in a way that's more like conversational almost. So basically, just that concept of vulnerability or seemingly vulnerable. And I'll go more into that, but there are often these traits that people think of as superior or dominant, or that they're able to try to overtake other people because they have something that they feel like is better. And it's not so much, in certain settings, I would say, okay, we can maybe let those things go. In certain, maybe, I'm playing with these ideas, but maybe some of these ideas aren't aren't I don't know what the word is. I haven't fully thought a lot of these through, but yeah, sometimes when people seem dominant, I wonder, is this person really dominant? Like, it seems on the surface like a lot of things that we might look at might seem like this person is superior to me and has ability to control me. Take a work setting, for example. You can see someone who's a hiring manager as someone who's in control because they can say thumbs up, thumbs down. We're going to hire you, we're going to not hire you, or we're going to promote you, or we're going to keep you the same, or we're going to fire you. We have the power to do that. So we can see these types of things and think about them and observe and look at them and be like, okay, like, yes, I do see this in society. I do see this come up and happening. But is it accurate? Because that's kind of, I guess, the question that I'm having is, are these perceptions accurate? Not so much why does it happen, because I think that's how I was phrasing it before, but are these perceptions accurate? Are these accurate perceptions that somebody's in charge of you? Because, for example, if there's someone who is, you know, using narcissistic traits, gaslighting other people, lying, spreading gossip, doing all kinds of negative behaviors against someone, then, you know, if they're doing negative things, then yeah, if they're doing negative things, then they basically are trying to get away with stuff a lot of the time. And I've noticed this about people who feel like they're superior to other people, who are trying to like dominate other people and control other people. I've noticed that theme come up, that they lie about a lot of stuff. They do tend to do that. They lie about a lot of stuff. They're always like trying to tweak things in their favor to make themselves look better in the public eye. I've literally been in a room with people who, I've witnessed a situation that they completely denied ever having had that happened, or multiple situations that they completely denied that ever happened, or they mentioned a situation involving me, for example, that I know never happened, and I'm like, sometimes you just gotta call BS, but I literally just got up and left the room because I was like, that's how I deal with things sometimes. I'm like, this is me reacting, and whether or not they pick up on it or not, because they want an argument and they want you to verbally fight back. But if I get up and leave, I know they're not going to follow me. I get up and leave, and then other people might be questioning, like, why did you get up and leave? Why did they get up and leave? It's like, and that person probably knows why I got up and left, because they know that they're lying about some situation that they're making up to make themselves look better. I mean, I'm talking about like an abusive individual who was mentioning that something happened that never happened. That was like, oh, I only did this thing one time for reason X, Y, and Z at this one situation. And I'm like, nah, it was way more than one time, and the situation that you're mentioning actually never happened, kind of thing. It was like that. And so I'm kind of like, yeah, BS, but then they tried to, I mean, I'm just trying to pull different scenarios. Like, they tried to basically make it sound like afterwards they're like talking about me, like saying like a couple nice things, like not necessarily about my personality or anything, but they were saying kind of like a couple nice things about them, kind of about themselves, like how kind of how I would like have a place in their life, and like that, usually I'm a calm, mild-mannered, good person to be around, and that was like a one-off kind of situation. Like, they were basically trying to say that like they reacted towards me abusively in a certain way because I did something to some other family member this is like when I was like 6 or something. They were saying that I did something that I did never do. I never did this. Um, and I would have remembered. Like, I would have remembered if I ever did what they said that I was doing. I never did this. Um, and they said that I did, and I know that I didn't. But they were trying to justify that they were reacting that way. And it all started because one of my other family members was like saying how they thought that I was really nice and what could I have ever possibly done. Like, they don't ever see that I could have ever gotten in any kind of trouble. Like, they don't ever see me having gotten in any kind of trouble, or that I could have potentially gotten into trouble. They're like, what could I about me, like what could they have ever done that would have led, somebody to be, trying to punish them or something. And so I was like, yeah, probably nothing. And then that's when this person kind of makes up this story out of the blue where they're like, oh, well, actually at one point she did this, and so I reacted that way. And I was just like, that did not happen, you know. Um, but things like that, where people think that they can kind of just like say stuff where it's like clearly they're lying. They're clearly lying. Um, and, trying to like maybe take some form of blame, like, oh yeah, like I have been abusive before, but then trying to say like, oh, it was only this one incident where this one thing happened and it was so long ago. And I'm just like, BS, that's not true. you know um like, I could put some dates to things. But there's no point because they would completely deny it. But sometimes it's like, yeah, we all know. You know what I mean? But yeah, just when there's scenarios like that, I mean, I don't know if I'm the only one who's been in situations like that where I'm just like sitting with certain people that like they just like expect that you're supposed to agree with their lies, or like I don't know what they expect you to do. Either, you know, start challenging them on it so that they can argue, or I mean, that's one option, challenge them on it, and then they're just gonna start this argument where it's like this whole he said she said kind of thing, um, where they're just gonna make it seem like, well, you wouldn't remember because you were young, or I remember better, or whatever. Like, there's no way of getting around those kind of arguments, um, and so there's kind of no point in arguing with people who know that they're lying, because this person literally is like making up lies on the spot. So it's like, what the f is that, Um, so to me, I'm like, okay, is there a point in challenging that? Um, maybe there is, maybe there's not. I don't really know. In that scenario, I got up and I left the room because I was like, well, I'm not gonna sit and listen to this BS. Um, so I just got up and left the room. Um, and because I was like, I don't know, I'm not gonna start an argument with this person, um, and things like that. So yeah. So another thing that I was realizing is that I don't know if blinded is the word, but maybe like they get like blindsided um by people who they see as weaker. So if they see somebody as so if there's a person who an abusive person sees as someone who is maybe in a more vulnerable position, if they see that a person is either sticking up for themselves or, taking a humble or passive route, then the insecure person is usually going to keep trying to take advantage of that. But they also get kind of blindsided by it, because I've noticed if you don't challenge them and you don't give them any fuel to work with, but if you take a passive, humble kind of position, they don't know how to deal with that. They kind of spiral. It doesn't make it really better, because then they get more insecure. And a lot of times, like, I think the thing that I want to keep mentioning is, a lot of times these things are unprovoked. Like, these people come out of the blue with stuff. Like, you're just minding your business, going about your day, doing what you gotta do, dealing with what you gotta deal with, and they're the ones who start the BS. They start it, like, all the time. They start it. It's usually them who's starting this nonsense. You're just doing what you're trying to do, and they see you, and then they're like, I need to do something to attack this. And I've seen it so much that it's just sickening to see. It's just like, I'm not even talking about like direct personal experiences. I'm just saying, like, I've seen it so much. And it's kind of hard to really understand. It's like they don't know how to interact with people, and especially if they see somebody who's kind of acting more passively or humbly, or kind of meek, mild mannered type of a person, they just want to attack it all the time. And it's like, what is wrong with these freaking people? So, um yeah, usually, the insecure person is usually going to try to take advantage of anything that they see that they can try to exploit. And I put that, it's pretty sick, but I see it all the time too. Um, for my own opinion, I think in there's a lot more strength, there's a lot more power in being humble and passive and mild mannered, and kind of like this meek personality. There's a lot more power in that. Now, society doesn't teach us that is a powerful position, but I've noticed it's a powerful position. And I'm not saying like people shouldn't defend themselves or people shouldn't stick up for themselves. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, when it comes to people, especially when they're kind of like on the verbal end, or trying to like emotionally manipulate and psychologically manipulate people, when you kind of take a more like passive role or humble role with these types of people, you know, they do not know how to react to it, because they need the fuel to fight. Because the second you kind of bite the bait, because they're trying to bait you basically. That's what I see it as. They don't know how to engage with people like normal people. They don't know how to do that because they're so insecure. So they see someone, this is how a scenario would work. They This insecure person sees somebody that they could consider as some kind of vulnerable person, either in size or age or financial status, or if someone's relying on them in any way, because they know that they have a bit of an upper hand there. They're like, well, if this smaller person decides to try to physically dominate me, well, I'm bigger than them, so I can overtake them. If this person decides to try to, intellectually pop off at me and like make me feel inferior, then, I can just take away some of their rights or some of their comforts. I have a more dominant position to, you know, take from these people. Um, but I'm not saying that the other people are weaker necessarily. They actually have a lot of strength. They might not see it, but they do. Um, and so it is kind of a weird dynamic that there are a lot of insecure people who, either think that they're bigger or smarter or tougher or something along those lines. They're just super insecure. and they walk around insecure all the time, and then when they see somebody that they think that they can kind of try to dominate in some way or control in some way, they just provoke and they try to like instigate something on the spot. It could be anything. It could be anything. Like anything. Like, and it's not something that you would even think that they would even complain about, but they'll complain about it, you know. Um the car can never be cleaned good enough on the outside or the inside. You know, the house can never be clean enough. People can never sleep at a certain time or wake up early enough or do things. Like, they just expect everybody needs to be doing things the way that they want them done, the way that they need it to be done. They don't see other people's perspectives. Who knows if they even care? Um, they just want to control everything, you know? Nobody in their eyes has the right to do anything differently. And so, you know, there's no way of predicting, you know, you could try to be like perfect of everything that they've ever mentioned and not do what they've mentioned bothers them, and they'll always find something that bothers them, you know. Always, they will always find something. If it's someone at work, they will always find something, you know. Like, you know, like I've talked about this before. I had a supervisor who tried to come at me with some grammar things, and she was talking about where to put commas and things like that. And she's like, I can't believe that English isn't even my first language, and I know this and you don't. And I'm just thinking, like, what a bitch. Like, who says that to somebody? And it wasn't even, she wasn't even right, actually. She wasn't right. Um, but, you know, she would pick at things like, how many spaces do you put after a period? One or two? And she'd like, it was stuff like that where it's like, oh, you put one space, it's supposed to be two. Or, oh, you put two spaces, it's supposed to be one. And like, really, someone's gonna make you go back through like a 30-page report and try to put an extra space or delete an extra space after every single period, and then kind of going back and forth about it. It's like stuff like that where they would just be like, you know, you have to follow the BS that they say. And I'm not even exaggerating. Like, these were the types of things where I was like, this was my training in psychology. It was for basically it was almost a year, but it was like 8 months. This supervisor was basically grammatically trying to correct all of my writing, my write-ups. And like I mentioned, we wrote reports that were like 30 something pages long, and she would go through them and just like, you know, they were due every 4 weeks or so. So every week she came back with more corrections. And I was just thinking, like, this doesn't make sense. Like, how do you get this far into grad school, into a doctoral program, and not know basic grammar, first of all? That's what I was thinking. I was like, if I was really this bad, somebody would have caught it. I wrote a master's thesis. Nobody complained about my grammar there. And I had a supervisor who was looking at my work at least once a week, if not more often. We sat with everything that I wrote, with the lit reviews, with everything. I read journal articles, I read papers, I read full journals, I read textbooks. It's like, come on. Like, it's not like I don't know how to read or write. And, you know, here I have this lady that just because she's in charge of me and has me in an office behind closed doors thinks that she can do or say whatever the heck she wants, right? And I'm just like, you know, it's easy to not put two and two together. But when I kind of noticed how she was, I was like, this is BS. Like, and I got to deal with this person for this long. You know, it's like, you know, just so I can get out of it. And then at the end of it all, she didn't even want to write me a recommendation letter. She kind of hassled me about it when I asked her. And she was like, you know, I don't really want to recommend you. Um, and not that I even did anything wrong, but just she just was like that. That's just how she was. Complete bitch. Um, and she's not working there anymore. She's working somewhere else. And I've talked about it before. I just randomly Googled her sometime during this year of 2023, and I saw that she has patients, and some of her patients are saying the same thing, about her in her reviews. And I'm just like, geez, she's out there now, you know, working not with students, but with, another vulnerable population. And these people always need vulnerable people who seem like they're in a vulnerable position. But I just want to encourage people to know that you're not really in as vulnerable of a position as you might think you are. If you need to record stuff, record it. You know, have some kind of backup. If you need to record these people. Get them on audio. I know in the state of California you can't just record people without their knowledge, but it's like, dude, like some of these people deserve to get recorded and called out. I'm just saying. Um, One of my friends created a YouTube channel about their toxic roommate, and just whenever the roommate just starts popping off at these toxic topics, and just like they just set up a camera and just record it, and a lot of times this person knows that they're being recorded, and they won't even stop. And I've heard and seen what this person has to say, and I'm like, what the F? Because I know my friend, and I'm like, there's no way that my friend would have said or did anything to make this person be talking like this. And they're just a jerk. I was like, wow. Like the things they were saying, you would have thought that my friend went and like destroyed his property or did something to make him act like this. And he did nothing. He's doing nothing but just trying to cook his meal. And this person just takes that opportunity to just lay into him for like hours on end, to a point where they even have a restraining order and had to go to jail for violating a restraining order. You know what I mean? It's like these people have no control over themselves, and their insecurities. Like they just cannot function. Some of them actually do, unfortunately, function very, very well, which is not good because a lot of them do seek positions where they're going to be in power. They always seek positions to be in power. And you kind of find out how they get there sometimes, and you're like, this is gross. But I don't know, man. Like, I'm not, like, these types of people just kind of gross me out, in all honesty. And so I'm not saying that people shouldn't defend themselves against violence or anything like that. But I do think that insecure people can't seem to help themselves from picking at people and instigating and, just looking at it from a distance. It's like, what the heck. And so some questions I was having was like, is there even a benefit of trying to interact with people who act that way in such an insecure way? Is there any benefit to interacting with those types of people? Lately my approach has been to avoid those types of people. I feel like they don't deserve my energy or time at all. Not at the moment, because they've become a problem, and it becomes a problem in my life. But then another part of me is like, from the psych world, I know that they can benefit from, having corrective experiences. But I also don't think that, a person has to put their own, mental health on the line just so that these people can grow. And they try to win you over. They try to be personable. A lot of them try to be charming. They definitely have some kind of personality disorders going on often. But, it does actually seem to be a cycle. A lot of times these people, when you look at their history hasn't been super easy. Usually they had at least one person in their life that was a complete douche. Maybe. I mean, I don't have like so huge of a sample size to work with. But I definitely do know that I have a lot of clients who've had a history of abuse against their own families or children, and um, yeah, they've had a history of abuse and against them, and then they in turn are abusive towards people, and they have a lot of psychological disorders going on. Um, a lot of times, these people have been from being in poverty a lot of the time. Um, Not always, uh, but possibly even the people who maybe they're of a generation that wasn't in poverty, they are, um, I don't know, they're kind of forced, they kind of, not forced, but they have like some kind of power dynamic because they might be the first generation that has money, and so they kind of use that as another method of, of control. um I don't know, and I don't want to make this like some completely negative thing. That's what I started out saying, and I do mean that. It's just, it's hard. How do you talk about abuse and other people's insecurities and mental disorders without it sounding negative? I mean, you kind of can't really put a positive spin on it. Um, but I do think that people who feel like they're in a vulnerable position, you can come from a vulnerable position and be very powerful. Like all these people that I've had in my life, and it's a handful, it's not too much. All these kind of toxic people that I've had in my life in the past, um, they all know that I have dirt on them. They all know that, you know. They all know. They all know what they've done that's wrong. Um, they all know that they've done things against me that I never provoked them to do. And they all know that they've, at one point or another, wanted a relationship with me and wondered why they couldn't have one. Um, and so there's stuff like that where it's like, you know, I wouldn't call that having no power on my end. It's a different type of a power, but I think that people, I'm playing with this idea that I think that people who have these insecurities see people with these, who they would perceive as a vulnerable person, they perceive that as a threat. They perceive vulnerability as a threat, another person's vulnerability as a threat to them. That's one thing that I think, or that it's an idea that I'm playing with, is they see it as a threat. Now, Dolores Cannon has this, I don't know what the concept is called, but there's a concept that Dolores Cannon brings up that speaks about, it talks about, um, different, how do I word this? Like basically, if there's stuff in life that you haven't worked through, kind of with her idea of like what it looks like, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's called reincarnation, but it's like a form of reincarnation where it's like you will come back to this earth to redo that. So I guess the main premise is that, us as humans, we all chose from, being a higher being, we all chose to come to earth at the point in time that we chose to deal with certain complex issues. So you would take something like the concept of abuse or the concept of just having toxic people in your life. We chose to have that experience, to come onto earth, to be born into whatever, type of upbringing we were born into, good or bad, or in between. We chose that. We don't, once we're on earth, we don't remember that we chose that. We don't remember that this was a choice that we made. We don't remember that I, opted into this choice. Therefore, my experiences, positive and negative, but in these scenarios I'm talking about would be more of like usually negative experiences. We chose to have very complex experiences as humans here on Earth, and we're lucky in the universe that we got these choices to come here and have these experiences. And if we don't work through them, I don't know if this is the same concept, but like if we don't work through them or find a solution of how to react to them in a way that we're supposed to, then we get to come back and have a do-over. Like anything that we haven't learned how to adjust to, then we have to come back and do it again. And we don't get that long. Yet maybe 100 years if we're lucky, or so, give or take. And we have this life to figure it out. Now, I don't really know. I mean, to me, I wasn't raised with that concept. I was raised with like the heaven and hell kind of Christian thing. I think I prefer, the theory that Dolores Cannon talked about. But that's why I was kind of thinking about, I try to think about things lately, and I'm not very good at it, not good at it yet, but I try to think about things lately. Okay, if there's this challenging situation that comes up and it's difficult, and if that was the actual case, that I chose to come to this earth to have this certain kind of negative experience. Now, I'm not currently in any kind of a situation where there's somebody who's actively able to be abusive towards me. I'm not, so that's good. But if something comes up that's negative, like something common that comes up, like people trying to scam me with job opportunities, you see these life insurance places, with these scammy kind of things that pop up trying to like, oh, we'll give you an interview or whatever, and then it's just like BS or some other kind of thing. Like there's all kinds of scammy stuff out there. Like, so it's like I could even be by myself at home on my computer doing stuff, and there's still like people trying to scam me, people trying to send me like oh, like this PayPal thing, or like what, there's like little things like that even come up with, like, I don't even have to be interacting with any human person face to face and still come up with emails or text messages that are like spam, or things trying to scam me, or phone calls, that kind of, that kind of thing. So how do I deal with it? What I'm trying to work on lately is how do I deal with things to move them forward in my own favor, to actually adjust to them and adapt to them and to actually move through it. So that's pretty much where that thought process is going as far as what Dolores Cannon was teaching. I hope the examples aren't too heavy, but alright, that's it for now. Thanks for listening.